Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. It's Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Glad to have you here. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. If you're watching us live right now, I appreciate you the absolute most. The people who get up early, those early risers who tune into the Wake Up America show and who file in and click that like button before they sit down, well, we appreciate you to the max. Make sure if you're tuning in now to click that like button and subscribe to the channel that you're watching us on if you are not subscribed already. Grateful to have our audience on multiple platforms: Apple, Fire TV, Roku, YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, a billion other places, and of course always at wakeupAmericaShow.com. When I was reading the headlines to get ready for the show today, I was like, oh my God, these headlines are so awesome. The stories are so juicy and so interesting. The video clips are just gonna, it's a chef's kiss kind of a show day today. So you're in for a real treat, I'll tell you, a real treat. I can't wait to share with you the first story that I saw this morning. And I'm reading this from the New York Times of all places. A white Starbucks manager who was fired amid a furor over racism wins $25 million. Whoa, what is going on there? The company fired a former regional manager because of her race amid the fallout from the arrests of two black men at a Philadelphia store. A federal jury found. I have the video from the original incident which sparked the backlash. We're going to talk about how Starbucks retaliated against white employees, not just her, but other white employees as well, in order to try to burnish their credentials as anti-racist. It's fascinating stuff. This, I mean, do you want another great headline that's fascinating and interesting and going to make you just chef's kiss? Listen to this from the Wall Street Journal. Companies quiet their diversity and sustainability talk amid culture war boycotts. What? Mentions of social impact initiatives during earnings calls have declined, reversing a trend that had picked up after the killing of George Floyd in 2020. Oh boy. And do you know why that's happening? Do you know why these companies are pulling back? Because of another title from the Wall Street Journal. I'm going to read to you this morning. Bud Light loses their title as the top selling U.S. beer. Oh, we're so sad. Too bad. Modelo Especial took over as the top sales spot, reflecting the enduring damage from a Bud Light boycott. Now, I just have to say, Modelo Especial was the second best-selling beer in the United States. Maybe them illegals really are taking over here in the United States. Just kidding. Just kidding. I mean, do white people drink Mexican beer here in this country? I don't know. Every once in a while, I used to drink some Corona sometimes, but then I was kind of like, this really does not taste good. If a beer doesn't taste good without the addition of something else, the lime, why would you drink it, right? It should taste good without the lime. It tastes good with the lime, but why not just drink a Bud Light with a lime? Oh, well, we don't drink Bud Light anymore because now it's gay. If Bud Light with lime means that you're bisexual. Yeah, oh my God, the stories today, yes, JP over there, let's fucking go, yes, we're so excited. Oh my gosh, it feels like we are advancing on nearly all fronts. When I say we who are fighting back again in the culture wars against wokeism, against leftism, against cultural Marxism, those of us who are on the side against environmental social governance standards of the corporations, those of us who are in the fight against these diversity, equity, and inclusion standards that make you take a loyalty test before you're able to apply for a job as a college professor. Everybody who's fighting that battle alongside me, you are my brother. And those who fight with me shall be my brother on St. Crispin's Day. Yes, we happy few, we band of brothers. Yes, for he today that fight with me shall be my brother. Boy, I really bastardized my Shakespeare this morning, didn't I? Oh, sorry. We do remember our Shakespeare, don't we? What was it? It wasn't King Lear. It was like Richard III or something like that. Somebody remind me which Shakespeare that was. You can text the show today at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. And I say, we're advancing on all fronts, nearly all fronts, not all fronts. We're not winning on all fronts. I think we are losing on the gun issue, unfortunately, not to say that we couldn't take ground on that, but when I see headlines like the one that I read last week about how a majority of Texas Republicans think that we need to have more restrictive gun Gun laws, it's just a disconcerting, it makes me
How
angry.
dare you?
Anyways, you can text the show today. If you think that there's a story that we're missing, you can send us in a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. Good morning to Nelson65, European Tin Beater, Bell R over at Rumble this morning. I think that Bell R is my buddy Richard Bell. Good morning, Richard. It's nice to see you, brother. I hope to see you again one day soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you're clicking that like button as you file into the stream and sit down. Here's an interesting story for you. A guest, this one reached out to me. So, a Chinese American businessman by the name of Miles Guo. He's a very controversial figure, but he's also a very powerful and influential voice in Chinese American politics. Over the years, Guo has been an outspoken critic of the Chinese Communist Party. He's accused it of corruption, human rights abuses, economic mismanagement, and he was also a vocal supporter of the Hong Kong protests. Well, you can imagine he became enemy number one in his former country now. But Guo was also arrested, apparently, here in the United States with charges related to business dealings that he had with President Donald Trump. And he is out there trying to get more people paying attention to his case because he believes that the Chinese Communist Party is working in tandem with the US government to stifle his free speech because of his political views. So he has actually sent a representative to reach out to the show. He wants to speak to you through his representative, Nicole Tsai, who will be joining us today on the program at 7:30 a.m. to talk about his indictment as well as the charges against Donald Trump. This Nicole Tsai character, she is a member of what is called the New Federal State of China. Very interesting new organization that we don't know much about, but we're going to learn more today at 7:30 a.m. when Nicole Tsai joins us on the program. So that should be super interesting, right? Boy, you don't have not too often billionaires reach out to be on a podcast. It's not one like this. So we'll hear from her at 7:30 today, and it should be fascinating. At 8 o'clock today, of course, that means it's Wednesday, which means, of course, Judge Napolitano will be joining us today on the show, which is perfect because we do need to talk about the Donald Trump indictment. He wrote a piece this week that will be featured on judgenap.com tomorrow. He always sends me a day before as a preview to talk about the charges that are being made against the former president. When I say former president, did you hear what's his name? The other who was on my show on Monday, for God's sakes, the AK-4, not the AK, AR-15 gun guy. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on the lawyer's name. For God's sakes, the St. Louis lawyer Mark McCloskey. Thank you, Mark McCloskey, who was on my show on Monday, said doesn't like it when I call him former President Donald Trump because he's very much on the whole Donald Trump is still a president, but he's not sitting in the White House these days. I mean, I don't get mad at me. Don't shoot the messenger. But I mean, the president of the United States is the guy that sits in the White House. Anyways, I know that that's like the QAnon conspiracy is that they don't, they think that Donald Trump is actually the president and calling the shots and Izzy, Dominic Izzo, who's been on my show several times, is like, I used to believe that hook, line, and sinker. So there are a lot of people who got taken in by that. And if you're still taken in by it, I don't know what to say. I'm not I'm not your QAnon guy. I listen to the QAnon guys and I have some friends who are into that world, but I'm just a little too skeptical for that kind of stuff. At 8:35 today, I think Chris Morrell's really gonna like this one. This is like when I read this yesterday, I was like, this has got Chris Morrell all written all over it. But for those who are all a member of Generation X, aka the forgotten generation, the generation that nobody talks about, right? We're gonna talk about the forgotten generation today. And we're going to talk about 5 Gen X values from the 1990s that can save today's world. We're bringing whatever back. Should be a great show today. I'm absolutely excited because the headlines just make me again. All right, it's anti-Italian discrimination. No, it's anti-white discrimination. And I hate how this one website that I was reading this story from phrased this. I was reading this from law.com. This is the summary of this story. Starbucks is ordered to pay $25.6 million that's a lot of money, to a white manager who claimed her firing was a case of reverse discrimination. The verdict includes $25 million in punitive damages, and the judge will consider an award for lost wages at a later date. The jury apparently rejected the defense's claim, Starbucks' claim, that the manager was fired for being ineffective. This is fascinating. So what I found, what really stuck out to me about this one is reverse discrimination. This idea of reverse discrimination. I don't like the phrase reverse discrimination because it implies that discrimination only really goes one way, and that, oh, all of a sudden discrimination against white people, well, that's discrimination in reverse, as if like anti-minority discrimination is something that happens on a daily basis and it's extremely common. Because here's the thing, this story started when this Shannon Phillips, she's the one who won the $25 million lawsuit. She was being retaliated against. She had nothing to do in connection with the arrest of two black men who went into a Starbucks, didn't order anything, and were promptly kicked out of the Starbucks for not ordering anything and trying to use the bathroom, which was essentially that particular business's policy at the time. So this is sort of a tangled web, this story, and I'm going to try and explain it to you the best I can as I was putting the pieces together last night and this morning in order to bring this to you the best I can. But I'm going to go ahead and play for you this clip. This is a news clip from the event that happened when this happened 5 years ago. Okay, so we're going to go over to my Twitter weirdness scene so that you can watch this clip and you could see how they framed this as a racist attack against two black men who were peacefully sitting in a Starbucks, not doing anything or not harming anyone, and they didn't do nothing wrong. So, and then you could see it caused all these protests. Probably a lot of people don't even remember this incident. So let's go ahead and play this clip from, again, 5 years ago. And now it's culminated into this racial discrimination suit where a woman, white woman, won a lawsuit for being discriminated against for being white. And I'll explain to you after we play this news clip about how Starbucks retaliated against her, even though she literally had nothing to do with this. Take a listen.
No longer, no further.
Protesters calling for justice today after the arrests of two black men at this Philadelphia Starbucks on Thursday. This video, captured by a witness's cell phone, shows police talking and later handcuffing the men while they were waiting for a friend. The men wanted to use the restroom, but the manager said that per store policy, they couldn't since they didn't buy anything.
Right.
When they wouldn't leave, she called police.
A group of males refused to leave.
Some witnesses say the officers overreacted.
They were just sitting there quietly, sitting on their phones, like chatting, like just like everyone else in Starbucks was.
Philadelphia's police commissioner says the officers didn't do anything wrong.
They followed policy. They did what they were supposed to do.
The men, who don't want to be identified by name, were held in custody for 8 hours before they were released. Prosecutors didn't file charges, but their defense lawyer says this wasn't about the law. It was about bias.
A lot of people are saying this issue is about race.
A lot of people are saying, who is saying that?
Do you think this would have happened if your clients were not black?
I would love to hear the 911 call on this case, but what's the 911 call you're never going to hear? Hi, this is the Starbucks at 18th and Spruce. There are two white women sitting in here. One of them asked to use the bathroom and she didn't order a coffee. Come quick.
Starbucks tonight in damage control.
What we need to do as leaders, we own this situation. We are responsible for this situation.
This was
and we'll
5
take
years ago.
accountability for making the necessary changes.
Meanwhile, video of the arrest has gone viral, many on social media calling it a clear-cut case of racism.
We should not be going through this.
One protester say went too far. Starbucks says the manager who called police no longer works at this store. Meanwhile, the criminal defense attorney for the men arrested wouldn't yet comment on whether or not they were considering filing criminal charges or any charges of their own.
All right, boom. Let's cut it there. All right, so let's get the story now and the background on this one and why I think this is so fascinating, especially in the current context of what we're looking at right now. And please forgive me for reading from the New York Times. Yes, I pay for a subscription, but I do that so I suffer so that you can laugh at the left. Okay. Here's how the New York Times frames this, okay? White Starbucks manager fired amid furor over racism. She wins $25 million. In April of 2018, two black men entered a Starbucks shop in the Rittenhouse neighborhood of Philadelphia for a business meeting with a white man who had not yet arrived. While they waited and before ordering, one of the two asked to use the bathroom. He was refused. Eventually, they were asked to leave. When they did not, an employee called the police. So then they got arrested. You saw the video of that. It captured, millions of people shared it online and were accusing Starbucks of being racist. There was protests like you saw boycott threats against Starbucks, right? The CEO apologized publicly, right? They took the extraordinary step, and a lot of people probably forgot about this, of closing 8,000 stores specifically for the purpose of teaching their workers about racial bias. But this Monday, in a surprising twist, a federal jury in New Jersey ordered Starbucks to pay $25 million to a former regional manager after determining that the company had fired her amid the fallout from that episode because she was white. Why did they fire her? What did she have to do with it? Well, turns out nothing. So the jury found that Starbucks had violated her federal civil rights of the former manager, Shannon Phillips, and they found that they had violated a law in New Jersey that prohibits discrimination based on race, and she got $600,000 in compensatory damages and then $25 million in punitive damages. So here's what they said is what happened, right? So Miss Phillips, the one who got the $25 million, she oversaw about 100 stores in the region, and Philadelphia was part of that. She was also in charge of South Jersey, Delaware, and parts of Maryland. Now, she had been promoted to this job way back in 2011, 4 years before this incident occurred, because of her exemplary performance. So her lawsuit said that as part of the damage control from the arrests, Starbucks sought to punish her and fellow white employees who were in and around Philadelphia, even if they weren't involved at all in the events that led to the police being called. So let me get this straight. Starbucks, in order to try and do damage control from all of the virality of the left who were attacking Starbucks for being racist because they asked these two men who didn't buy anything to leave, they actually went and retaliated against white employees who had nothing to do with it, right? They just said, go get me some scalps of some white people in this region. Miss Phillips just happened to be one of them. And what's funny is that Miss Phillips had been part of the company's attempt to do damage control. She actually threw herself into the company's efforts to restore its credibility. She tried to support hourly workers, organizing managers and staff stores to, people who were scared of the protesters. She was out there trying to help those people do damage control to protect them in order to ensure that those employees were safe because so many people were threatening Starbucks stores. But here's how this all went down. So Miss Phillips said one of her superiors, a black woman, told her to suspend a white manager who oversaw stores in Philadelphia, but not the one in Rittenhouse Square. Okay, so let me get this straight. Miss Phillips was told by her superior, a black woman, to fire a white manager of a store, not the store that was involved in this issue, right? So, and this was because she was told that she was to do this because of the allegations that he had engaged in discriminatory conduct, and Miss Phillips knew that wasn't the case. Okay. Now, in contrast, Miss Phillips said no action was taken against the manager who oversaw the Rittenhouse Square store. He was a black man. So the manager who oversaw the store where the incident actually took place was a black man. He was actually promoted. Okay. Are you following all of this here? I mean, is it as ridiculous as I think this is? This is hilarious. So Miss Phillips said that she was fired not long after she balked at the order to suspend the white manager from the stores that weren't involved. So when her black boss told her to fire a white manager not involved in that at all, she said that she just refused to do it, and she was fired for that because she was told that she was doing a bad job and that the only explanation that she was given for her firing was that the situation is not recoverable. Starbucks, of course, denied in court filings that Miss Phillips had been fired because she was white and said she was let go because she performed poorly. But if that was the case, why did they give her a raise and a promotion? During this time of crisis, the lawyer for Starbucks says Philadelphia's market needed a leader who could perform. Miss Phillips failed in every aspect of that role. Ooh. Starbucks ultimately chose not to press charges against the men at the center of the episode, but before suing over the deal, they reached a confidential financial settlement. The two gentlemen got a bunch of money from Starbucks as well. Miss Nelson got $25 million for what they are calling quote unquote reverse discrimination, but which in reality, of course, is just plain old discrimination. So does that all make sense here? And I have to say, there's no such thing as reverse discrimination. Discrimination is discrimination. But this sets a precedent. And you got to know that things like this are probably happening all across the country, actual discrimination. And it's nice to see that, justice is being done. Now, what I think is probably going to happen, probably the best case scenario out of this, is that will there be less racism against white people? Probably not. But what's going to happen is that it's going to be a lot more dangerous to do it, and companies are going to get punished, and companies are being punished. I mean, not only is Bud Light now no longer the top selling United States beer, not that beer was any good anyway. I did occasionally, I will say, maybe this is me flirting with my my latent bi side, but I did occasionally drink a Bud Light Lime and stuff, but that's because my dad would give it to me. But thankfully, I got my dad on the Yinglings anymore, so he's not going to give me those Bud Light Limes. But Bud Light has lost its title as the top-selling U.S. beer. Oh, you hate to see it. You hate to see it, don't you? Actually, you love to see it. And I love seeing this headline over in the Wall Street Journal, totally related. Companies have been quieting their diversity and sustainability talk amid the culture war boycotts. God damn, it feels good to be winning. Donald Trump's not even the president, and yet I'm not tired of winning. It feels like we can win even without Donald Trump as president of the United States. What do you think? Oh, come on. Don't get mad at me right now. You're like, no. You're like, hold on. Boo. I know my Trumpers are mad, but don't trust me. We are going to we'll have plenty of Trump supporters on the show. LMAO diabetes. What the hell are you guys talking about that over in the live stream? And why am I not privy to it? Send the show your text messages if you want to have your voice heard at 573-319-1586. FedEp Kentuckian did just that when he said, "We must only accelerate our fight in the culture war. The win must be so intimidating that the other side chooses to never fight again." Hell yeah. You love to see it. You love to see it. God bless America.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to
Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, and by the way, did you see that trans influencer who took her top down? I say her, but we're talking about a guy here with boobs. Took the one that took the top down. The backlash was so severe, and it must have been because of the Wake Up America show. Am I right? Of course. Is now banned from the White House forever, apparently, after they did the little striptease act on the White House lawn in front of all those kids. Anyway, so another win in the culture war for the right wing, I guess you might say. All right. It's all right to be white, says AP. Okay, I really want to talk to you more about this story, about how these social impact initiatives, companies are starting to back off from them. I've got a clip of a Starbucks employee who's like so upset because their pride flag has to stay in the closet, which is so ironic. And she can't hang the pride flag, and she can't go out there and talk to customers about being a homosexual who just want to buy coffee from her. I can't play that for you right now. I've got to wait until after the interview with Nicole Tsai, because she's coming up next, and I've got to go to commercial break to go get her on the show. This is when I close the curtain for a few minutes, but you're not allowed to leave. You're allowed to go get up and get some popcorn and then come back. You're allowed to go to apforlibertyshop.com and then come back. You're not allowed to turn off the stream. Okay, we'll be back to Nicole Tsai, who says that her boss, billionaire businessman from China, is being persecuted here in the United States because of him speaking out against the Chinese regime. We'll talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Hello, this is Barack Obama, and let me tell you why Austin Petersen stinks, and you should never pay attention to anything that he has to say. First of all, he's a libertarian, and we all know libertarians are idiots. They don't realize how important government is to everything that we do. I recently became aware that Austin has opened up a libertarian shop at apforlibertyshop.com. Now, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me that you never ever visit apforlibertyshop.com. With all of the great Liberty merchandise there, the last thing that we need to do is to get people spreading this message around the country, because then they might start thinking that they don't need government. And that's the last thing that good Democrats like us want. So if you love democracy, like me, and hate freedom, then don't visit AP for Liberty Shop. Like I said, whatever you do, do not visit apforlibertyshop.com. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
American conservatism is distinct, like America is distinct from the United Kingdom. American conservatism's roots comes out of the Wild West, out of pioneerism. The difference between American conservatives and European conservatives is that Americans are cowboys. We are that
God, guns, gold, and girls. It's wild here. And we should stay that way. We shouldn't allow a European version of conservatism to come and infect us here. We like it wide open spaces here, deep in the heart of Texas and all that.
Hey there, it's your favorite Vice President Joe Biden. I wanted to talk to you today about the Wake Up America show, the best source for all your political news and commentary. But before I get started, let me just make sure I have all my notes in order. Okay, where was I? All right, the Wake Up America show. It's a great way to stay informed and make your voice heard. Boy, what was I saying again? Oh, right. The Wake Up America show. It's important that we all stay engaged and knowledgeable about what's going on in our country and, the thing. But hold on, where was I going with all this? Oh, yeah. The Wake Up America show. It's a fantastic resource. And if you really want to make a difference, man, you can sign up to be a monthly donor at wakeupAmericaShow.com/support. Now, where was I? Oh, that's right, the Wake Up America show. So if you want to stay woke and support a great cause, head on over to wakeupAmericaShow.com/support and sign up to be a monthly donor today. And if you're feeling generous, you can even give a donation in my name. Thanks for listening, and keep on keeping on, America. Come on, man.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Looks like our friend Nicole Tsai is running just a couple of minutes behind, but when she arrives, we will get her on the program. Nicole Tsai is a member of the New Republic for China. She's going to join us to talk a little bit about some of the corruption involving the Trump indictment, as well as a Chinese billionaire who is tied to Trump through a social media platform and how the Federal Department of Justice is coming after him as well. We'll talk to her in just probably a minute or two, but first I want to remind you about Lear Capital, our sponsor for the show, who helps us to bring you the message of economic freedom and personal liberty. And if you love economic freedom, then you'll love Lear Capital. Visit them at learaustin.com. Oh, looks like she's here. I will be right back. Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I'm Austin Peterson. Nice to see you here. Thanks so much for tuning in the show. Make sure that you click that like button if you're tuning into the program this morning, and subscribe to help us spread the message of economic freedom and personal liberty, which is what this show is all about. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to be joined by my next guest, Nicole Tsai. She's here speaking on behalf of Chinese billionaire Miles Guo. He's a Chinese American businessman and political commentator. He's sort of a controversial figure, but he's also a very powerful and influential voice in the Chinese American community. Over the years, Guo has been very outspoken in his criticism of the Chinese Communist Party. He's accused the CCP of corruption, human rights abuses, and economic mismanagement. He's also been a vocal supporter of the Hong Kong protests and the Uyghur genocide. His views, of course, have made him a target of the CCP, and he's been banned from mainland China. His assets have also been frozen. He is now living in self-imposed exile in the United States. Now, a lot of the media, of course, are focused on Donald Trump's indictment, but not very much is being talked about regarding Guo's recent arrest. Late March, the DOJ placed him under arrest, Guo that is, and authorities claim that Guo carried out the massive fraud through an array of investment schemes on Trump-aligned social network Getter. Joining us now on behalf of Guo is Nicole Tsai. She is a member of the new federal state of China, and she's joining us this morning. Good morning, Nicole. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
And good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself very briefly and this group that you are a representative of.
Absolutely. So I was born in communist China, and I came to the United States of America to pursue my American dream. And 20 years ago, I became a naturalized U.S. citizen. So this is my home. And I have never gone back to China because I just cannot relive the nightmare of living under communism. So I joined the Chinese whistleblower movement founded by Miles Guo, CCP enemy number one, back in 2017. I mean, in your opening, you talk about he's a very highly controversial figure, but you know what? He's the most persecuted Chinese dissident on the U.S. soil. So, the mainstream media in America are going after him, and the weaponized Department of Justice and FBI and SEC and the U.S. federal government agencies are also going after him. And this is why he has been falsely charged and locked up in federal prison without bail. And so people, talk about the multiple indictments against President Trump. And, I saw so many people, American patriots, are taking to the street to protest the injustice against Mr. Trump. Likewise, the Chinese, there are millions and millions of Chinese people from around the world. We are protesting the injustice against Miles Guo that has been, enacted by the federal government agencies in this country, and because we know that Miles Guo's, whistleblower movement has not only threatened the party of Xi Jinping in Beijing, but also presents a very dangerous threat to the American sellout, to the proxies of the CCP within the federal government agencies. And that's why the CCP has activated its secret apparatus within the federal government agencies like the DOJ and FBI to persecute Miles Guo. So this is the kind of, 1 minute story about Miles and why I'm here.
Well, you definitely came to the right show this morning, Nicole, because my audience is very sympathetic to those types of concerns. I said just a few days ago on social media that the thing that is so remarkable about the attacks by the federal government against Donald Trump is that they are actually doing it now to a member of the political class, what they do to American citizens on a regular basis. And so highlighting what's happening to Miles Guo on this program is a good way for us to get into this conversation about the special relationship that many of the people in the United States federal government have with the Communist Chinese Party. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show this morning, good morning. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Austin Peterson, and I'm speaking to Nicole Tsai. She is a representative of Miles Guo, a Chinese American businessman and a political commentator. Nicole is a member of the new federal state of of China. Can you talk to us a little bit about the sort of the timeline here when it comes to Miles Guo and how his sort of departure from communist China to the United States in regards to his timeline of what he was saying about the Uyghur genocide, for example, and the his criticism of the Hong Kong protests? When did he come to the United States, and how did the retaliation by the U.S. federal government against him begin?
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I know, in this country, people are blowing whistles against the government overarching and power abuse. And this is exactly what we have been experiencing with not only the CCP regime in China, but also in this country's federal government agencies. Mr. Mao Guo is the most targeted political dissident in this country. He came to United States of America in 2017. And so the CCP has issued red notice from the international Interpol. They're trying to catch him on the global scale. And so Mao Guo chose to come to America because people were looking up to America as a safe haven for political dissidents. But unfortunately, the CCP's infiltration in this country has gone so deep that, never before we know that there are CCP assets within this country, and especially in the federal government agencies. So after he came to the United States of America, the CCP enlisted the help of a full-time Department of Justice employee, George Higginbotham. He is a lawyer with the Department of Justice. So he took $41 million from the CCP and agreed to help the CCP to remove Mao Guo from the U.S. and sent back to China by influencing the DOJ and the White House. So this is a well-orchestrated influence campaign on the Department of Justice and on the Trump's White House. And so the CCP entailed the help of a full-time DOJ employee and two prominent donors of the RNC, the Republican National Committee, Elliot Brody and Stephen Wynn. And so, as you know, this tells you how fearful the CCP is when it comes to Mao Guo, because he's the most wanted man by the CCP because he possesses exclusive knowledge and intel about the CCP's plan to take down America and to destroy the free world. So Mr. Mao Guo is the biggest asset, not only to America, but to the entire free world. And that's why the CCP has spared no effort hunting him and trying to remove him from the United States of America. So I like to give the credit to Trump's White House, Jeff Sessions, the former Attorney General during the Trump's White House, and Steve K. Bannon, and these people said no to CCP's influence campaign. So that's why Mr. Mao Guo was able to continue his stay in the United States of America. And so after the CCP has failed its attempt to remove Mao Guo from its hundreds of millions of dollars influence campaign, they decided to launch a lawfare against Mao Guo in America's courthouses. So the CCP has used money, tons of money, and mounted more than 70 lawsuits against Mao Guo in the U.S. courthouses. And so the people who became, there was a big CCP proxy in this country. His name is Shang Weijian. He's a chairman and CEO of the biggest private equity firm in Hong Kong. So this guy resides in San Francisco with his family and friends. And so Shang Weijian, he's the head of the PAX, and PAX became, a lead force to launch the lawsuit against Mao Guo and forcing Mao Guo to claim bankruptcy in Connecticut. So that's why, Mao Guo, he was a billionaire and he gave up his billion-dollar lifestyle to fight the CCP, and he ended up claiming bankruptcy in the United States of America. And so the SEC falsely charged him of a $1 billion fraud of an investment opportunity for GTV. And so GTV is, and I'm one of the investors. You may ask, why you guys want to put your, lifelong saving and money to establish a GTV platform? Well, it's because our voice have been censored in this country by America's big tech. I mean, Mao School is among the first one to be permanently suspended by Twitter back in 2017. So he lost his Twitter account, and Google and YouTube, Facebook, and all the big tech have been censoring Mao School and our voice. And that's why we wanted to have our own independent media platform where we can have our voice heard without being censored. And you know what? The SEC, he took our money, and so all of the investors' money are with the SEC, and then the SEC blamed Miles for fraud. Yet in the indictment, the government cannot even name one real victim's name. I mean, it's a $1 billion fraud without a victim. Mao School is the biggest victim. He himself is the biggest victim of a weaponized DOJ and FBI and SEC. And so on March 15th, the FBI sent more than 100 agents, and they raided Mao School's New York residence. And shortly after he was removed from his New York apartment, there was a fire mysteriously, broke out in his apartment and damaged that property and a lot of the evidences. So we don't know who set his apartment on fire, and FBI still cannot tell us. Basically they owe us an answer about
Nicole,
who set his apartment on
fire. If I may interject for just one moment, Nicole, briefly, just so for people who are just tuning into the program, I want to make sure that they know who you are and say thank you for that thorough and detailed explanation. I have some more questions for you in just a moment. However, our live stream chatters this morning, Justin Peterson, my brother, is watching. He says, I always say that the immigrants who have experienced the lack of freedom in other countries will save us in America because they often have a powerful corrective view. That's a great comment. Zion Wen says Miles Guo and the new federal state of China are the most shadow banned CCP whistleblowers from 2018 till now. There is no fair reporting on this movement. And our friend and moderator this morning, Cheeky Mayor, over on the live stream on YouTube, says has dropped your Twitter account, Nicole, so that people can follow you over there. Make sure that you do so that you can get more news about this movement. One question from one of our listeners, Nicole, this is from Corey C, says, can she please elaborate on the secret police stations that the CCP runs here in the United States? I'm not sure how those exactly operate, but they seem to be very scary for a Chinese dissident. It does appear, Nicole, as if the Chinese Communist government does have operations to try and return Chinese citizens back to China if they are dissidents. There is a presence of the Chinese government here in the United States, isn't there?
Absolutely. So the CCP's secret police station or the spy network has been operating on the U.S. soil for many years, okay? And I don't know why the DOJ and the FBI are not going after the CCP's spy network and the secret police station. Of course, we know they've been spending so much time and taxpayer dollar and resources going after the witch hunt of the Russian hoax. That's why they're not doing the real job of protecting American people against a foreign adversary. The real threat in this country, the biggest threat is not Russia, it's the CCP. So coming to the question, I mean, in almost every major city across the United States of America, from San Francisco, Los Angeles, to Atlanta, to New York and New Jersey, the CCP has spy network, and they often reside in the Chinatown. So that's why, it's actually not the FBI or DOJ first discovered the CCP secret police station in Lower Manhattan. It's the Human Rights Watchdog. It's the media report. So it took Mike Gallagher, the chairman of the GOP Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, to write a letter requesting and demanding the FBI to investigate into the CCP's police station in Lower Manhattan, weeks after the news has been breaking out and the human rights, watchdog are talking about this. So, and urging the FBI to investigate. So because of that, the demand and pressure, the FBI started their real job, and they announced the arrest of 2 Chinatown men in Manhattan for setting up a secret police station that has been operating in Lower Manhattan for so many years. I mean, their job is to spy on the Chinese American citizens and dissidents in this country. And not only that, they put together a fundraiser party and re-election campaign party for the Democrats. I mean, we have shown, the CCP's state-owned propaganda showed the photo and the videos about the CCP's secret police station in Lower Manhattan, putting together a fundraiser for Congresswoman Grace Meng, a Democrat from representing the New York district, and also Chuck Schumer, U.S. Senator Chuck Schumer, was caught in that fundraiser party along with Mayor of New York, Eric Adams. So, this CCP police station is interfering with the U.S. election. I mean, they don't just spy on the Chinese dissidents like myself. They're getting involved into the local politics. They organize a fundraiser and votes for the CCP preferred candidates. I mean, why aren't the FBI and DOJ going after the CCP's infiltration on the US soil? I mean, for years, they spent millions and millions of dollars going after President Trump and going after the witch hunt of the Russian hoax. But they don't catch the real threat and real interference with the U.S. election, and that is the CCP. So you know what? After they announced the arrest of the two Chinatown men who set up the secret police station in Lower Manhattan, those 2 people were bailed out instantly on the same day. But Mao School cannot be bailed out.
Nicole, we are very impressed by the quality of your reporting here. You are a representative of the new federal state of China, speaking out against corruption of not only the Chinese Communist Party, but of the Department of Justice here in our own United States. And it's certainly something that our listeners, regular listeners to the Wake Up America show, are keenly aware of, and something that we like to keep an eye on. So we are deeply grateful for your generosity of your time this morning. Nicole, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners before we let you go today?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I would love to come back on your show because there's so much to talk about the CCP's infiltration in Capitol Hill, in Wall Street, in federal government agencies. But I do want all of your listeners to pick up your phone, to call your congressman and ask them to support Congressman George Santos' bill. He just introduced a bill last week called the Guo Act of 2023. So this act was named after Mao's Guo, and it's also called the Government Unanimous Oversight Act of 2023. So what this bill does is to help stop the CCP using money to corrupt the politicians in this country and to stop the CCP's infiltration in the federal government agencies. Because we do not want this country to become a CCP country, and we do not want the elected officials to represent the CCP's interests. We vote these people into the White House, into the Capitol Hill, and to represent we the people, the American people's interests, and we want them to uphold the U.S. Constitution and preserve the U.S. Individual liberty and freedom. We do not want these people to start working for the CCP, and that's the bottom line.
We'll look into that Guo Act for you, and definitely our moderators should grab a copy of that legislation and drop it in the chat so our listeners can follow it, as well as your Twitter account, which has been dropped into the YouTube chat as well. Nicole Tsai, she is here fighting for freedom here in the United States as an expatriate from communist China, and she's joining us here on the Wake Up America show live. Nicole, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for fighting for freedom, and we appreciate your time. We hope to see you again on the Wake Up America show very soon.
And thank you so much, and keep up your good fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Have a wonderful day. That was Nicole Tsai. What did you think of Nicole? Send us a text at 573-319-1586. Coming up next, Judge Andrew Napolitano to deep dive into those indictment allegations against Donald Trump. Will he go down to Chinatown, get arrested, sent over to China? No idea. We'll talk to Judge Napolitano about that when we get back on the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
To the Cantina crew, this is Elon Musk, the CEO of Twitter, and I just want to say thank you for watching the Wake Up America show. I've decided that Austin Peterson will be the new CEO of Twitter.com, effective immediately. First thing to do, though, is I've got to go and blast off into space.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
If I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors, what would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter, male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers, we have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state. Reject the Antichrist. Visit AP for Liberty Shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Well, the headlines today have been absolutely enormous, and many of them have been good news, great news, if you're a friend of freedom. But when it comes to what's happening to Donald Trump, even freedom lovers like myself who have bones to pick with Donald Trump have to say, this does appear to be political, but it shows the corruption of the Department of Justice here in the United States. We are now seeing a historic event where a sitting president has arrested his political opposition. Truly, there has been no precedent for this. Joining us now to discuss is a preeminent legal scholar and a leading light in the fight for liberty here in the United States. He's the host of the Judging Freedom podcast, which you can download on any of your mobile devices, and his weekly column, of course, is at judgenap.com. He's the man, Judge Napolitano, joining us now. Good morning, Judge.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, no matter what we're talking about.
Of course. Judge, these charges against Donald Trump, your take on them?
Well, my take is that the charges are serious, that the indictment is laden with evidence, unlike almost every other indictment I've seen, and that most of the allegations against him come out of his own mouth, that he is his own worst enemy. So there are several sources for the evidence against him. One is the documents themselves, which clearly are NDI, that's National Defense Information, that can't be declassified. They contain military secrets. The one that he waved around in front of guests at his New Jersey home contained plans for, which thank God he rejected, plans that were prepared for him for an American invasion of Iran. NDI is always and everywhere unlawful to possess outside of a secure federal facility. We know about this because he did this on tape, not surveillance tape, but he knew he was being taped. He was actually doing a very generous thing. He was sitting down for a 2-hour interview by the ghostwriter and the publishers of Mark Meadows, his last chief of staff, who's writing his autobiography. Mark asked him to do a 2-hour interview. He agreed. In the middle of the interview, he pulls out this NDI document that he still had, and he said, "This is secret. I could have declassified it." He was wrong. He couldn't. I could have declassified it, but I didn't. And staff member says, "That's a problem." And he goes, "Yeah, that's interesting." So these are his own words acknowledging that he had this document. What does this do? This relieves the government of the obligation of proving an element of the crime, which is knowledge. They can prove that element out of his own words. Second category of his own words is testimony from his own lawyers against him. Now you may say, well, how can somebody's lawyers testify against them? What about the attorney-client privilege? Here's the attorney-client privilege in a nutshell. You're a lawyer, a client comes to you and says, "I expect to be charged with bank robbery. If I am, what are my defenses?" "Oh, the money was yours. The bank is crazy. The bank's been doing this to you because they don't like you. It wasn't you. You were 1,000 miles away," whatever. That conversation is privileged. It can't be released. On the other hand, if the client comes to a lawyer and says, "I plan to rob a bank, and if I do, what will my defenses be?" That conversation is not privileged. In this case, Trump lied to his own lawyers and caused them to lie under oath to a grand jury and to the FBI when he said, "I don't have any more documents." He also forgot that there are over 50 security cameras in Mar-a-Lago, and the feds had the tapes. And it shows his principal aide, the guy that was indicted with him, taking documents out of a secured area, feds 2 days later examining that area and then putting the documents back in. When the feds learned or concluded that Trump lied to his own lawyer, they subpoenaed the lawyer. The lawyer moved to quash the subpoena. A federal judge held a trial, and she decided this is the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege, where the client uses the lawyer to commit a crime, lying to a grand jury. When that lawyer testified before the grand jury, he said, by the way, the president handed me the documents and said, take them back to your hotel room and make them disappear. So my point is, as well as I know him, as much as I like him as a person, we've been friends for nearly 40 years. He is his own worst enemy. It is his own words that will that have produced the vast majority of the evidence in the indictment.
This is really an interesting case. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm Austin Peterson. I'm speaking to Judge Anna Napolitano. Make sure you click that like button and subscribe to whichever channel that you're watching us on this morning. We are broadcasting to about a dozen different station and networks this morning. Judge, a couple of things. One is my question about his lawyers, because as I understand it, two of his attorneys had quit the day before he went in for indictment. Were those the lawyers that are now themselves in trouble? And my next question for you, Judge, which I think is probably the most interesting, is it possible that the president, in sort of taking that document, the one specifically about the plans for the invasion of Iran, is it possible that he was doing that as an insurance policy if the deep state were to come after him so that he could prove the hostility of the military industrial complex of the United States? That may sound conspiratorial, Judge, but I think you and I well know the dark forces that operate within our government that definitely did not like Donald Trump because of his stance on military affairs.
Well, I'll take the second question first because it is the more fascinating of the two. I don't know because I haven't seen the document, but apparently it was signed by the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so it was prepared by his staff, and it includes an analysis of where Iran is weak and where they would be attacked, where their nuclear facilities are, how many American forces we would need, how the forces would get there, and how the attack would work. I don't know that it has anything to do with him personally, and we don't know if he asked for it or if the Department of Defense just gave it to him. But it clearly is unlawful. This is not a presidentially generated document. You might ask me another question. What about the Presidential Records Act? Well, the Presidential Records Act lets ex-American presidents keep documents that they have created, not documents that have been sent to them. Documents sent to them are the property of the sender, of the United States government, not of the recipient under federal law. As for the lawyers, there's a mystery. The lawyers who resigned the day the indictment came down are not the same two lawyers referred to as Lawyer A and Lawyer B in the indictment. Lawyer A is the one to whom Trump lied about whether or not he had the document. Lawyer B got that information from Lawyer A, and Lawyer B, signed a statement under oath to the feds. The feds decided not to prosecute A and B because they believed they were duped by Trump, but it's because of that duping that he lost the attorney-client privilege. Trump obviously believed, as all of us would, when talking to a lawyer, I can say anything I want. This is absolutely protected. And show you how old I am. When I went to law school, that was the law. It has since changed to insert this crime fraud exception. So if the lawyer uses the client, or if the client uses the lawyer to perpetrate a fraud or to commit a crime, there is an exception to the attorney-client privilege, and the conversations around that subject matter are not privileged.
So if you
Why
murder
those two lawyers quit, I don't know. And this has caused him a lot of agita. Austin, there are over 1 million pages of documents in this case. Some new team of lawyers must begin with page 1 and make their way through page 1 million, starting as soon as he hires them. He still hasn't hired a new legal team.
This is absolutely wild, Judge. I mean, unprecedented here. Where could
Yes.
this all end up? I was having an interesting conversation with my wife the other day, who didn't know that you could still run for president if you were, or you could still run for office if you were in jail. Is that a possibility here?
Well, our friend Congressman Matthew Lyons, who was prosecuted under the Alien and Sedition Act by President John Adams, ran for re-election from a jail cell and won. Norman Thomas, the socialist, who was jailed for speaking out against World War I, and the conviction was upheld by the courts, ran for election for president against Woodrow Wilson from his jail cell and got 1 million votes. So the Constitution only has 3 requirements for president: 35 years of age minimum, natural born citizen, and residing in the U.S. for the 14 consecutive years preceding election. The states and the feds cannot add to those requirements without amending the Constitution. So yes, he could run for election from his jail cell.
Do you think that we would probably be better off as a country if our president of the United States was running the country from a jail cell, get in less trouble that way?
I think he'd have less influence that way, and the president, and not Trump's fault, the presidency has become a monarchy, and maybe it would be diminished if he were in a jail cell. I honestly can't even fathom how all of that would work. I don't know when the trial will take place, but knowing his personality as I do, I don't think he'd enter into any type of a plea agreement, because that would require some sort of an admission on his part. He has repeatedly referred to these documents as my documents, my papers. I understand the way he feels because I know what he's like. He can't accept the fact that he lost to Joe Biden, about whom he has an extremely low opinion. And he still wants to surround himself with as many of the trappings of the presidency as he can, among which are these kind of documents. But they're not his documents. They're not his papers. They're the property of the United States of America. Here I am, true North libertarian, if ever there was one, defending big government in an area where I basically condemn it, which is secrecy. But this is what the law is today, and this is what the law was when he was president.
We don't have to like the law to understand what the law is and to explain the law, and so that we can understand how the government might come after us in similar situations or case studies. Judge, speaking of the law, but when we talk about it being applied, it's being applied to Donald Trump. It doesn't appear as if it's being applied to Hunter Biden. It doesn't appear as if it would be applied to Joe Biden in this case, these allegations of a case of potential bribery against him, of which there may be some evidence. We have not heard these audio recordings that are alleged by Chuck Grassley, who on the floor of the Senate the other day claimed that there may be audio recordings that provide evidence of a bribery scandal involving a Ukrainian businessman, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And then perhaps you can answer another question, which is, can the president pardon himself?
All right. Well, on Hunter and Joe, if I could amend your question, I'd add Hillary in there. I said then and I say now, she should absolutely have been prosecuted. In fact, her crimes, as alleged, were far worse than Donald Trump's. But the DOJ, which was basically a bunch of Clintonistas at the time, permitted the FBI to decide that there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute her. That's not a decision the FBI makes. The FBI is an investigatory agency. They present the evidence to the DOJ and those lawyers decide. But Loretta Lynch and her colleagues decided they weren't going to prosecute Hillary. They wanted her to run for president. This is July of 2016. She's leading him in the polls at this point. And they had Jim Comey take the heat. In terms of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, I don't know what this evidence is, but if it's anywhere near as serious as Chuck Grassley has described it, and interestingly, he described it on the floor of the Senate. So on the floor of the Senate, he accused the president of bribery. If he had made that accusation anywhere else, the president could sue him for defamation, even though truth is a defense. But he can say whatever he wants, thanks to James Madison, who wrote the speech and debate clause, which insulates members of Congress from the consequences of what they say on the floor of the Senate. If this evidence is what Chuck Grassley says it is, and Jim Comer, a Republican of Kentucky in the House, says the same thing, he claims he's actually seen this stuff in a secure federal government facility from which he wasn't allowed to remove it. We need to know about it. We need to know about it right away. It is too late to prosecute Biden for bribery. Statute of limitations is 5 years. This happened more than 5 years ago, but it is certainly not too late for the public to know about it. Can he be impeached for pre-presidential behavior? Probably not. Would the Democrats renominate him with this kind of an albatross around his neck? Of course not. That would actually be a favor to the Democrats, most of whom among Democratic leadership do not want to see him run. He's too old, he's too withered, he's too mentally impaired, and quite frankly, his stewardship of the executive branch for the most part is indefensible. Can the president pardon himself? The last time the Supreme Court looked at the pardon power, they said it was full, final, and absolute, which I guess means he can pardon himself. That would frustrate the basic principle of law that no one can be a judge in or evaluate the merits of his own criminality. But the pardon, and there would be political consequences to the pardon, perhaps even impeachment again, but the pardon would probably be valid.
Boy, Judge, that is some fascinating stuff. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We're grateful to have you here. Please click the like button and subscribe on whichever channel that you're watching us on this morning. If you have a question for the judge, you can send us a text message at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts this morning on the indictment against Donald Trump and the allegations of bribery against Joe and Hunter Biden. Can you imagine being in a position such as Joe Biden with a son like Hunter Biden, Judge, and to have to make the kind of moral decisions? I don't envy President Biden, but there's something about someone like Biden who, when they get their grips in power, that there's nothing that would stand in their way. He obviously loves his son and wants to defend him, but at some point you have to. I would say that the presidency itself has to be protected against a threat like Hunter Biden. Do you think he would ever throw his son under the bus?
I agree with you about the presidency itself being protected. Even though, as I said, the presidency has become a monarchy, this is nowhere near what the framers intended. It grew in leaps and bounds. It grew under the dictator Lincoln. It grew under the so-called expert Woodrow Wilson. It grew under the patrician FDR. And then, of course, it continued to grow under every post-FDR president, including Ronald Reagan. So the presidency is a monstrosity out of control. Would Joe Biden throw his son under the bus? I can't imagine that he would. I would think whether he runs for re-election and wins or loses, or doesn't run for re-election, expect a pardon of the son at the tail end of this presidency.
Within the Democratic Party, the polls show that President Biden is largely favored to be the nominee again. However, he does face an actual challenge, with his next best challenger, I believe, being RFK Jr., at something like 26%. A sizable portion of that party, but not enough to win RFK the nomination. On the Republican side of things, Trump enjoys a similar popularity, enough such that his next best competitor is something like 20 digits down below him in his Ron DeSantis. If the primary elections were held today, Judge, I think it would be a foregone conclusion that those two would be the nominees. But in consistent polling of the American people, Judge, they are deeply unpopular. The American people do not want to see a rematch of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, and yet it seems inevitable. Is our primary system broken, Judge?
Well, the primary system is really controlled by the party elites. Now, occasionally somebody can break through, like Jimmy Carter did in '76. But look at it this way. I mean, Joe Biden and the Democrats have manipulated the primary system to front load it in states where he is more likely to prevail over RFK Jr. I don't think they took him. I happen to like RFK Jr. I disagree with him on a lot, but I agree with on things that Democrats don't usually say, like, you know, vaccines are a fraud and the lockdowns are unconstitutional and the war in Ukraine is none of our business, and the CIA was responsible for the death of his father and his uncle. And the Democratic elites hate hearing that, but Biden has to start taking Bobby seriously. He started out in the polls at 10%, then he went to 20. Now he's at 26. He hasn't even started campaigning yet. I don't know if the primary system is at fault. It is still in the hands of the elites. The elites always produce candidates. Trump may be the exception of this, who follows the big government model. Even Trump himself signed legislation which enhanced the debt. Even Trump himself used drones to kill adversaries. Even Trump himself extended the reach of warrantless spying, about which I had numerous conversations with him. And you know that I believe that we don't really have two political parties. We have one big government, pro-war, pro-welfare state, pro-national security state, pro-central banking party. People like Thomas Massey and Andy Biggs and Rand Paul are, for the most part, exceptions to that. But everybody else falls in lockstep when they have these critical votes. Like, can Janet Yellen really borrow all the money she wants and mortgage the future of every American taxpayer? Answer, yes. Well, how did that happen? The Republicans voted for it. That's how it happened.
Judge, can I ask you a question about third parties in the United States? Because this is an issue that I've wrestled with in my 15 years of political activism for libertarian causes, and for most of my political career, for about 10 years, I gave my time and my activism to the Libertarian Party until such a time as I realized that that activism was mostly going to waste. And I left the Libertarian Party and sort of did what Milton Friedman did, where I say I'm a small L libertarian out of principle and a big R Republican out of expediency, not principle. But in regards to the question of third parties in the United States, when you look at multi-party democracies of Europe, I do not envy them. I don't see a system, a multi-party system in Europe as any more functional than the United States. As a matter of fact, I see them as more dysfunctional and more prone to the capability of not only having a libertarian party, which if it is truly the third largest political party in the United States, and I don't even think that is even true anymore. They've shrunken to such a micro stature, Judge. But that would mean then that we would have communist parties, socialist parties, and the cause of freedom in the United States would not be advanced. More than likely, Judge, when it comes to democracy, you and I, we know we're outnumbered. We're outnumbered on the right. There's one libertarian for every 9 ultra-right statists, whether they're national socialists or just, you know, Mitt Romneyite neocons. They're all socialists compared to us, Judge. So would a multi-party system here in the United States really give us more freedom in reality, or is this just some theory that we have in ourselves, and that if there were more parties in the system, that more liberty would be the result? I sort of have a hard time believing that, Judge. Maybe you can enlighten me.
It would be very gratifying to be able to vote for someone with whom you agree on 99% of the issues, but that gratification is not going to produce any hardcore results. So reluctantly, I agree with you. And it would be better if Republicans had first principles and stood by them. The Democrats have first principles and stand by them. I've often said this. In fact, I said this to his face and he hugged and kissed me. Chuck Schumer. I'll tell you a Chuck Schumer story another time. One time I'm on an airplane and I'm seated next to Al Sharpton and behind Bill O'Reilly and in front of Chuck Schumer, and Schumer wants to take a selfie and O'Reilly won't do it. I'll give you the details another time. But I said to him, I got to hand it to you. You're a socialist, but you admit it. You want to grow the government and you do it. You make a promise and you stick to it. Republicans promise the opposite and they still vote with you. That's the difference. Have I answered your question? I don't know. I think the European systems are dysfunctional. But the Tories under Maggie Thatcher, the Tories today are a mess. In Britain, the Tories under Maggie Thatcher stood for small government. The Labor stands for big government. Tories have never stood in the modern era for maximum civil liberties, and nobody in Great Britain stands for civil liberties anymore except criminal defendants.
Judge, these conversations are so necessary because you and I, when we have these conversations, we're talking about the underpinnings of the American Republic. It's quite frequently batted around in circles that we hang in that America is not a democracy; it is a republic, which is true. We are not a democracy; we are a republic. But underneath that constitutional republic is the question of how do we elect our representatives, and we do that through democratic processes. There is this question that I have, Judge, that is a constitutional question in regards to positions on secession, and I guess within the Constitution, the question of the legality of secession, I think, is completed. After the Civil War, it's illegal to secede. But you and I know that just because something is illegal does not mean that it's immoral. Something can be perfectly illegal, but perfectly moral. Something can be constitutional and illegal. Something can be immoral, unconstitutional, illegal, right? And so it's this juxtaposition of these three positions in which we have to sort of decide, the pros and cons of any policy that's being weighed. But within the Constitution itself, Judge, is this clause that states that the federal government must ensure a Republican form of government in every state. So my question is, in regards to the question of secession, does that not put the states at odds with the federal government? And would the federal government not be mandated to maintain that state within the union if it were to try to secede, because the federal government must ensure that that state has a Republican form of government? Therefore, if a state were to try to secede and say if Louisiana wants to bring back slavery, that would be against Republican governance principles, and therefore the federal government is mandated to step in by force if necessary to maintain that state in the union. Is that a problem with the question surrounding secession?
Well, I happen to think that secession is moral and legal and constitutional because the guy who wrote the Constitution said that, little Jimmy Madison. Now, as for the guarantee clause, which is what the clause is referred to in legal parlance, where the federal government will guarantee a Republican form of government. The last time the Supreme Court looked at this was 1824. So you're 30 years before the Civil War. And the case is called Luther versus Borden, in which the state of Rhode Island decided to abolish its legislature. And the Supreme Court said Republican form of government means an executive separated from a legislative, separated from a judicial. Didn't tell the state what their laws would be. If Louisiana seceded from the Union, or if under Donald Trump, this would have been wonderful, California seceded from the Union. I was just there last week and I didn't have to show my passport when I landed at LAX. If a state seceded from the Union, it would no longer be a state and the feds would no longer have authority over it. Now, we all know what happened in the Civil War. My light just went out, bear with me. We all know what happened in the Civil War and the war between the states, and everybody assumes because the North won, it is therefore illegal or unconstitutional for the states to secede. My argument is the only way to put a check on the federal government is to have a power outside the federal government. Madison understood that. Jefferson understood that, which is why they both wrote under pseudonyms at the time in favor of secession and nullification. Jefferson, under his own pen, under his own name, wrote that we should have to reestablish the laws once in every generation or have a revolution once in every generation. Can you imagine if we had to ratify the Constitution every 20 years? If the 5,500 federal criminal statutes had to be reenacted every 20 years, this would cause us to rethink, what the hell are we doing here? This bears no resemblance whatsoever to the Constitution the framers gave us. The federal government is a monstrosity. Either that or it collapses of its own weight like the Soviet Union. It can't pay its bills. Nobody will want its money. Nobody will work for it because its cash will be meaningless, and we will break off into 10 or 12, this is more likely in my view, independent republics. If Montana wants to secede from the Union, they can enter into a treaty with the United States whereby the United States military will defend Montana from invasion by Canada.
Now, Judge, in the preamble to the U.S. Constitution, it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility," right? Ensuring domestic tranquility, certainly a violent secession would not be quite tranquil. They say, "Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and, quote, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity." And that posterity thing is where I'd like to leave you and let you have the last word here, Judge, before we let you go. And then I'd like to get a preview of your show. But when they talk about securing the blessings of liberty, not only for themselves, but to our posterity, that would seem to fly in the face of what Jefferson had stated when he said there should be a revolution every 20 years, especially against this idea of domestic tranquility, because certainly every generation we're only one generation away from losing our freedom. But there's this old Greek proverb, Judge, that says that a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. And certainly the founding fathers saw the Constitution of the United States as that tree in whose shade we now sit, and our ability to defend ourselves from infringements upon our free speech or our Second Amendment rights. And the Supreme Court, while the legislature and the executive branch have not been a friend of liberty, the Supreme Court has been one of those blessings of liberty. And we, the posterity of the founding fathers, do sit in the shade of that tree. So is there not an argument to be made from a constitutionalist perspective, Judge, of the blessings of liberty that have been secured despite all of the evil in the world? I mean, when we compare the United States relatively to the rest of the world, and maybe I'm going to sound now as an American exceptionalist, but there is something truly exceptional about the United States and our Constitution, and about a unity of states that provides for our common defense and that secures the blessings of liberty, not only for ourselves, but our posterity. Am I wrong?
It's a long question and a long answer, but I'll just address it briefly. The third word of the preamble is a fraud. It was not "we the people," it was "we the states." The word "people" was just put in there to try and make this popular. People didn't vote on the Constitution, the states did. It wasn't even the state legislatures. It was conventions of political leaders, white, Protestant, landowning males who voted in favor of the Constitution. Madison was criticized very tepidly for putting the word "people" in there instead of states. The last time the Supreme Court examined whether the preamble governs anything else in the Constitution, Chief Justice Rehnquist said the preamble is meaningless. It doesn't distribute power. It doesn't govern anything. It's nothing but an aspiration. It doesn't guide our hands. It's a literary ruffle and flourish. Does the Constitution preserve liberty? There's two ways to look at the Constitution: formally and functionally. Formally, it still exists. We still elect the president by the Electoral College. We still have a House of Representatives. We still have a Senate, although it's been tampered with terribly by the 16th Amendment, which makes it popularly elected. So it no longer represents the states as states. It's just another way of representing the political forces amongst the people. And we still have an independent judiciary. But functionally, the Constitution has failed miserably in its second purpose. Its first purpose is to establish the federal government. Its second purpose is to keep the government off our backs, and it has failed miserably to do that, thanks to the presidents whose names I have ticked off earlier: Lincoln, Wilson, FDR, and everyone post FDR. That's about the best answer I can give in the limited amount of time that I have left. I have Colonel Douglas McGregor, 3:00 Eastern today on Judging Freedom, and at 4:00 Eastern, the man my fans love to hate, Mr. CIA, Mr. Go to Mass every day and receive the Blessed Sacrament, but start coups in foreign governments, Jack Devine.
Judge Napolitano, our friend over on Rumble, Leisure Quest this morning says, God bless you, Judge Napolitano. Deo Vindici, speak the truth. Matters of liberty cannot be solved by the barrel of a gun. Judge Andrew Napolitano, host of the Judging
And
Freedom
matters
podcast.
of liberty cannot be solved by the majority either, because the tyranny of the majority is worse than the tyranny of a madman.
Judge Napolitano, with only 1 minute left in this stream before it was going to get shut down. Judge, you are the hero of so many people on this show, and mine as well. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. God love you, Austin. Until next Wednesday.
Thank you very much. And you as well, Judge. What do you think of Judge Andrew Napolitano? Wow. So I got that message from Zoom that says your time is running out. It was like 1 minute left. What do you think of conversations like that? I know that they're not for everyone, but I do know that there are a small amount of people who listen to those kinds of intellectual conversations and really appreciate them. But don't worry. We've got lots of unintellectual things to talk about next. I'm just kidding. We've got lots of fun things to talk about next. 5 things about Generation X that could save America. Yeah, we're going to talk about that when we get back on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. You've heard me talk about John Burke's company, Shell Shock CBD, and I have to say that I absolutely love Shell Shock CBD. Their Delta 8 products are great if you want to have a fun time on a weekend, but their CBD products can help you get through the regular aches and pains of a regular day. Hey, I'm your host, Austin Peterson, and yes, I am doing a live commercial to talk about my friend John Burke's ShellShockCBD.com business, where you can get a 10% discount on any of the items that you buy over at ShellShockCBD.com today by using that code AP4Liberty. Ever since I threw my back out last week, and I am still feeling like hell, I have been using the roll-on, roll-out CBD freeze roll-on, and it has definitely been helping to dull the pain that I am receiving. I'll tell you this, that if you do not receive the same results as I am testifying to you right now, you have got a money-back guarantee. So let me endorse and recommend my friend John Burke's ShellShockCBD.com website for you to go and get pain relief. 10% off. Use that code AP4Liberty. That's AP, the number 4, AP, the number 4 Liberty. Use that code AP4Liberty to get yourself 10% off these delicious gummies. Oh, the Fallout gummies. These are THC free with CBD in them. Delicious pineapple, yes, very sweet and tasty, covered in sugar. But if you're looking to have a good time on a weekend, maybe you're feeling adventurous and you'd like to try that looking like a Willy Wonka bar, Delta bar with, goodness gracious, every brick of chocolate has 40 milligrams of Delta 8 in that. And that's the fun stuff that you don't want to take before you go to work or do a Wake Up America show, I'll tell you, because you will get yourself in trouble and sound like a fool. Coming up next, 5 ways Generation X can save this country. We'll be back with more on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
Donald Trump, and I approve this message. Believe me, Austin Peterson is the best. He's got the greatest Wake Up America show I've ever seen. Whenever I tune in the mornings and watch the live stream, let me tell you, he has got the absolute best content. I love his guests. It's just a total blast to watch, and I highly endorse and recommend the Wake Up America show. It's terrific, believe me.
Step right up, ladies and gents, to learn about the coolest president yet. He's not just any old prez, he's Calvin Coolidge, and boy oh boy is he different from the rest. He was quiet as a mouse, but don't you underestimate his power. He knew how to handle money, and he didn't waste an hour. He cut taxes, lowered debt, and balanced the budget with ease. No wonder the Roaring Twenties brought such prosperity and peace. But don't take my word for it. Grab a copy of Calvin the Coolest President and see for yourself. It's a children's book that'll make you smile and help your little ones learn about wealth. You can find it on Amazon Kindle or get your hands on a paperback at apforlibertyshop.com. So come on down and get yourself a copy of the book that's making waves all around town. You won't regret it, so get ready to be floored because Calvin Coolidge, well, folks, he really scored.
I'm a public defender.
I am a public defender.
I'm proud to be a public defender.
80% of Americans accused of a crime will get appointed a public defender.
Everybody from a speeding ticket to capital murder.
For every dollar we spend on public defenders, we spend $3 on prosecutors.
Public defenders have to do pretty much everything on their own.
Social workers, counselors.
Investigating is another piece of it.
The average public defender holds 300 cases annually.
You never feel like there's enough time.
Public defenders have health issues all the time.
A lot of people give up and say, I can't do this work anymore.
Gideon's Promise trains, mentors, and supports public defenders.
There are a lot of people who say that they would not still be public defenders, but for Gideon's Promise.
It's fueled me to continue on in this fight.
Gideon's Promise has changed the face of public defense.
People see us as troublemakers.
Good trouble only.
We don't make it easy. It should not be easy to take away someone's liberty.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume again.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
any real-world experience.
It's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Make no mistake, reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show at wakeupAmericaShow.com. Boy, I tell you, I'm exhausted from all this freedom. So much freedom. Our friend Bob Snyder over on Facebook this morning, good to see you. He says that he loved the conversation with Judge Napolitano. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you very much, Bob. And thanks for tuning in to the show. It's nice to see some faces and names and chats over there on Facebook. These days, most people hang out over on YouTube or on Rumble, but we are also streaming on Fire TV, Apple, and Roku. And I do keep the Facebook stream up, even though we don't get a lot of viewers over there, for people like Bob who like to watch it on Facebook. And I know Chris Morrill misses the days we were all over over on Facebook. But quite frankly, I can't take the risk of having all of my invested time and energy into Facebook because I've never been censored on YouTube, but I have been censored on Facebook a lot. And I would just be terrified that one day I'd come in and my Facebook account is just gone. So I don't take the risk over there. These days, I mostly invest in YouTube and on Rumble, as well as a new app called Spreely, which is essentially means speak freely. And the Spreely app is how we're able to connect to people over on Apple, Fire TV, or Roku, of which many hundreds of you are watching us over there right now live. Grateful to have you as well as a new viewer. If you're just tuning into the Wake Up America show, you might be asking yourself, who is this guy, this Austin Petersen? Is he a conservative, a libertarian? What is he all about? Well, I'm a former Libertarian Party presidential candidate and former U.S. Senate candidate as a Republican here in the state of Missouri. I consider myself to be an advocate of the ideas of economic freedom. And that comes alongside the ideas of Milton Friedman or Ludwig von Mises or Friedrich Hayek or Frederick Bastiat or Schumpeter or Eugene von Bombewerk. A bunch of names in there. You're probably like, what the hell, Austin, shut up. But basically, I believe in limited government. And when it comes to personal liberty, I believe in civil liberties and the right to be left alone and the right to be able to do as you please with your body, provided that you harm no one else, that you own your life, you own your body, and should be able to do with it as you please. Again, with the important caveat that you cannot harm anyone else. And that includes children who should be protected from predators. Makes me what? I guess a little bit of a right-leaning libertarian, if you will. I just believe in freedom, man. You might have heard my phrase that I coined a dozen years ago when I said that I want to live in a world where gay married couples can defend their marijuana fields with fully automatic machine guns. And yeah, the LGBT movement have definitely gone off the rails, especially with this clip. I've got to play this for you. I was just kind of laughing about it. These LGBT employees at Starbucks who are upset at their employer for not letting them put their pride flags up everywhere at their Starbucks because so many of these companies are starting to back away from their diversity, equity, inclusion measures after Bud Light was dethroned as the top beer in the United States. Take a listen and look at this. It makes me crack up.
I love it. I think that it's different.
Starbucks marketing themselves as pro-LGBTQ, but will not allow them to put their flag up.
It's Pride Month, and we're still not allowed to hang pride flags inside of our store. And some store managers are telling their employees that they're not allowed to hang pride flags.
Say, how is Starbucks, a so-called pro-LGBT community company, celebrating Pride Month this year by taking down pride flags across the U.S.? That's the caption there if you're listening to the audio podcast later. Taking down the flag.
Looking at here.
Oh, no.
Well, those are our pride flags. We have had them up every year for, I don't know, as long as I've worked here. This is the first year that no one hung them up, and they're just sitting in the bathroom. So why are those in this bucket right here instead of hanging up during Pride Month in a Starbucks? Well, Starbucks says that it's unsafe. We don't have a ladder to be able to hang them up properly.
You gotta love the BS excuses that corporations come up with for things like this. It's unsafe to hang up the pride flag because we don't have a ladder to be able to hang them up safely. That is like, that is dumb. One of the dumbest excuses I've ever heard. You know, they'd be bringing in the gayest rainbow ladder they would to be able to hang that thing up. But she's like, I just love the expression of this lady's face. Like, she's just so upset. And is there some irony to the fact that the pride flags are being forced back in the closet and stay in the closet?
So we're just not going to hang them up this year. And so Starbucks has had these hanging up in the lobby before this year, correct? Yeah, every year for as long as I've worked here, which is 5 or 6 years. That's really crazy.
Oh no, my company who's trying to sell coffee is worried about alienating customers. Oh God. My brother, Justin Petersen, gay as he be, says, imagine being so fragile you need to see a flag to know you can be a member of society, or just order your coffee. Am I right? Thank you. Oh my God. Oh, so funny. Anyways, Starbucks marketed themselves as pro-LGBT, but they made us remove our pride flag. I think that is different. Oh no, it's terrible. Okay, all right, Austin, you've only got like 5 minutes left. It's time for us to talk about 5 Generation X values that can save today's world from the 1990s. Are you ready? I got to do this one fast. I really liked this story. It was from this website called Upworthy. He says, we're bringing whatever back. He says that, and he tells a story about a kid that he found out watches television at 1.5x speed. So this is kind of common, and it's so that young people can like cram in as much television viewing as they can, right? So that they can kind of get through the shows from the golden age of television, right? But you sort of sacrifice the entertainment value of the show just to get to the end. And the writer of this article says that he would have been crucified if he lived back in the 1990s as a 45-year-old card-carrying member of Generation X. I remember at a time when nobody bragged about the amount of TV they watched. True, right? Like, who brags about how much TV they watch? He says, in fact, they bragged about not owning a TV. I don't watch TV, man. It only exists to sell you stuff. And he writes that this complete reversal on the social acceptance of gluttonous TV viewing made me wonder what happened to the values we were raised on as Gen Xers. We were taught that sincerity was for simpletons. Yeah, no, that's true. I remember the 90s. People like, if you were sincere, like, you're an idiot. Everything corporate is evil. That was the 90s. That's starting to come back a little bit. Old school is always better than the latest and greatest. Newest iPhone, anyone? Authenticity is king, conformity is death, and there is nothing worse than being a sellout or a poser. God, that is the 90s to a T. Nobody would have ever referred themselves to themselves as an influencer in 1991. That is the definition of a sellout. See, I never call myself an influencer, but I do try and influence you to buy products. He says, deep inside the heart of almost every Gen Xer is a deep-seated feeling of nihilism. We didn't trust the corporations that laid off our parents or gutted their pensions in the 80s. Everything corporate was predatory. We didn't have a lot of faith in family values because we were the first generation raised by single parents or in daycare, and they didn't care about politics. Back in the 90s, Gen X's aversion to politics was historic. Remember Garth and Wayne from Wayne's World when they did the whole like joking about all the corporate products and sponsorships, and Garth is wearing the Reebok hat and he's like, it's like people only do things because they're getting paid, right? Well, I'm getting paid by myself at apforlibertyshop.com. So here I am being an influencer and a total sellout. Visit apforlibertyshop.com because it's time for me to sell out. All my 4th of July collection is 15% off. And this is the voice of a new generation. Anyways, here are the 5 values that Generation Xers could bring to today's youths and that could save our country. Number 5, buying vintage items. This one I already do, but most of them are guns. Nothing was less hip in the 90s than wearing mall clothes. If you had any style, you shopped at a thrift store and you bought used duds from the 70s and early 80s and you remixed them into something awesome. Okay. If you were hip hop or into skating, you shopped at the surplus store and rocked like Dickies or Carhartt gear. The mood of the times was actually very anti-fashion in the 1990s. These days, we live in a world where fast fashion is killing the environment, like Shein, which I actually like. That's where I get a lot of my weird shirts for the show from. And by embracing the Generation X value of old school cool, we can help the planet while looking much more fashionable in the process, says this writer. Number 4, corporate skepticism. In the early 2000s, people fell head over heels in love with smartphone technology and social media so quick that nobody said, hey, wait a minute. Now we have a world where kids are depressed, the culture is divided, and nobody talks to each other in public anymore. They just stare at their phones. He says, I can totally understand why young millennials and Luddite boomers would fall for the big tech ruse. But sadly, Gen X was asleep at the wheel and fell victim too. The generation that embraced the notion that TV rotted your brain needs to remind everyone to go outside and play in the sunshine or read a book. And if it's a book, it should be by Bret Easton Ellis, he says. I don't know. I've never read a Bret Easton Ellis book. Just say whatever. 2 of the most popular Generation X phrases were whatever and talk to the hand because the face don't give a damn. Oh, yeah. You put your hand up in somebody's face and they're just like, how dare you? And they're just like all day they just feel like, he got me. He told me to talk to the hand, right? Now, these may seem like flippant responses, but they are the correct way to deal with other people's nonsense. And in 2022, we have to deal with a constant barrage of it. God, yes, other people's nonsense on a daily basis, all day, every day. Just, you know what? You're right. We should just sometimes just be like, whatever, talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. I do miss that a little bit, right? But somewhere along the way, people forgot that it's more powerful to ignore someone than it is to admit they got under your skin. In the world of social media, we unintentionally amplify the most wretched voices by subtweeting them, commenting, and liking the posts of the army of grifters who are fighting for our attention. We also live in an era where people are addicted to outrage. The quickest way to stop fanning the flames of outrage is simple. Whatever. Like dogs distracted by squirrels, though, we've got our heads on outrage swivels these days. Throwing around the occasional whatever gives us the time and energy to focus on the problems that really matter and take action. These days, whatever matters more than ever. I love that. I love it. I'm going to pop my tags. Only got $20 in my pocket. Yes, we do love some vintage. Number 2, bring back snobbery. Oh, that's whatever. That's what it is. Whatever, right? The Winona Ryder thing where she'd be like, whatever. Or what was the girl from? No, it was from Clueless. Whatever, right? Number 2, bring back snobbery. Good taste used to matter. In the 2000s, millennials decided that people have the right to like what they like, and it's worse to judge someone's personal taste than to have bad taste. Gen Xers based their entire personalities on taste and demanded integrity from artists, and were rewarded by living in a time of superior films and music. These days, no one listens to new music, and we're stuck in a world dominated by comic book movies because no one stood up and shamed people for liking low-effort culture. Amen. Amen. What came first, the music or the misery? Number 1, political apathy. America's political divide is calcified over the past decade because more and more people are basing their personal identities on politics. That's created a culture where the dialogue between liberals and conservatives has become a shouting match that only makes people dig their heels in further. It's also created a culture in DC that has attracted a more debased form of politician and led to the gridlock that's halted any sense of progress. Sadly, Gen X has also been sucked into this vortex. The author writes, things were a lot different back in the 90s. Back in 1999, Ted Halstead of The Atlantic noted that Xers appear to have enshrined political apathy as a way of life. He says that Gen Xers exhibit less social trust or confidence in government, have a weaker allegiance to their country or to either political party. Compared to what's going on in America in 2022, this type of apathy seems welcome. Back in 2023, excuse me. Back in the 90s, taking a chill pill could solve everything. Wouldn't it be great if everyone took one and we could open our ears and hearts and have some constructive discussions? Well, it would be great. You just have to tune into the Wake Up America show to hear that kind of stuff. All right, I'm exhausted. We're not worthy, says Katie556. We're not worthy. God, great show. The guests, thank you, Matt, were great. Yes. Justin Peterson says low effort culture. Yes, exactly. He's stealing that one. Keep that one. Take that one with you. Leisure Quest 11 says, I hadn't seen the show till this morning when Napolitano was on. Good. What luck. Well, he's on every Wednesday at the same time. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Central Time, Leisure Quest. So if you like the judge, make sure you come back. But you should come back every morning. We've usually got top-notch guests talking about the biggest news in politics and culture. We are the resistance. We fight for economic freedom and personal liberty. That's what I'm all about. And my economic freedom comes through the AP for Liberty shop. Why don't you check it out at apforlibertyshop.com. Go to the 4th of July collection. Here's the deal, guys. You want to get your 4th of July stuff before the 4th of July, so you want to order it now because we've only got like 2 weeks before stuff starts getting a little bit dicey on whether or not it's going to arrive there in time. Everything's 15% off at apforlibertyshop.com. So why don't you head on over to apforlibertyshop.com and just browse through the 4th of July collection. If you haven't visited the website before, I know you probably roll your eyes and you're like, it's an advertisement. But here's the thing. I really think you're going to love the website because most of the products there are designed by me and my wife. It's not just like a bunch of stuff from like whatever smashed together. We worked really hard to build some like really cool and fun products. The Ron Swanson shirt is becoming a new popular one. Everybody wants to wear the shirt that I made that says, history began on July 4th, 1776. Everything before that was a mistake. Great Ron Swanson quote. I've got it on the t-shirt. It's 15% off. Get it over at apforlibertyshop.com. So head on over there now. Do a little bit of shopping this morning. Throw some things in the cart. I'm asking for people, if you've never visited the shop before, just take a couple minutes this morning, browse through, check it out. I think you'll find some things that you like. And again, don't forget, anything that's 4th of July related, 15% off. The American flag sneakers, though, take a little bit longer to get to you. So order those now if you want to have those awesome American flag sneakers for the 4th of July. All right, I'll see you tomorrow on the Wake Up America Show at wakeupAmericaShow.com.
I like shooting things, but whenever I can't shoot something, I like to cut things. My life isn't all about shooting and stabbing and cutting, though. Sometimes I have to do actual work, but when I work, I still like to have fun. And there's nothing less fun than trying to cut with a crappy knife. Thankfully, from the ancient sect of Christian knights, who also loved cutting and stabbing, comes a new implement that has received my personal blessing, the Templar knife. Like the ancient sword of Excalibur, you don't choose a Templar knife, it chooses you. You just decide what kind you want on the website first, however, and then order it online, and then it chooses you. The Templar knife comes in a variety of shapes. As a man of culture and taste, I have decided I will never use a terrible knife again. And thanks to the inspiration provided by this excellent product, I have decided to launch a new crusade against anyone using less than superior knives. Join me, brothers and sisters, by visiting uppercuttactical.com/pages/Templar-knives. That's a lot of slashes. For that, you'll need a Templar knife. For 10% off, use code AP for Liberty and join me in a quest for glory, for liberty, for Christendom, for the Templar knife. Get yours today. Fire.
Hello, this is Barack Obama, and let me tell you why Austin Petersen stinks, and you should never pay attention to anything that he has to say. First of all, he's a libertarian, and we all know libertarians are idiots. They don't realize how important government is to everything that we do. I recently became aware that Austin has opened up a libertarian shop at apeforlibertyshop.com. Now, I'm asking you as a personal favor to me that you never ever visit apeforlibertyshop.com. With all of the great Liberty merchandise there, the last thing that we need to do is to get people spreading this message around the country, because then they might start thinking that they don't need government. And that's the last thing that good Democrats like us want. So if you love democracy, like me, and hate freedom, then don't visit AP for Liberty Shop. Like I said, whatever you do, do not visit aporlibertyshop.com. I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Want an engaging website to boost your business? You're just a click away from 5-star Fiverr talent. Hundreds of freelancer skills like web design. Head to Fiverr.com today and get something started.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
It is better to settle these matters in the courts than on the streets, and new laws are needed at every level. But law alone cannot make men see right.